We'll now hear from an unparalleled group of decentralized finance innovators and change makers on how decentralized finance will define the next era of global finance. The panel consists of Dr. Ben Goetzel, Chief Executive Officer and founder of Singularity Net Foundation, Sudhir Pai, Capgemini's Executive Vice President and Chief Technology and Innovation Officer, Johan Eid, Head of Integrations at Chainlink Labs, Justin Amos, Ligon's Chief Executive Officer. And moderating this panel is Anjali Kapoor, Decentralized Marketing Chief and former media executive. Over to you now, Anjali.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for that introduction. I'm really excited to be a part of the Singapore FinTech Festival, and thanks for having me. Decentralization as a concept really fascinated me as I began digging deeper into understanding the potential of blockchains, crypto, the new asset class, and the cultural phenomena of NFTs earlier this year. I decided to fully pivot my media marketing career to Web3 and build decentralized marketing frameworks for brands, or DMAR, for brands to be a part of the metaverse. It gives me great pleasure to moderate this stellar panel with people who are building DeFi applications and investing in the future of finance. About 10 years ago, Mark Andreessen from A16Z published an op-ed actually titled "Software is Eating the World." And fast forward to today, we're witnessing how tech in the form of AI, IoT, blockchain is disrupting every traditional industry. We're here today to discuss how DeFi is going to transform traditional finance, a $25 trillion industry. Our discussion today is going to have three main threads. We're going to talk about DeFi and its advantages, moving on to the state of the current DeFi adoption, and the barriers and opportunities from a consumer marketing lens. So we have a lot of ground to cover, and we're going to dive straight into it. So to start with, let's just break down the concept of decentralization itself. And I'm going to start with you, Ben. How do you look at DeFi in the context of AI and the work that you're doing at Singularity?
Decentralized finance, I think, beginning and as such, it's just beginning to make use of artificial intelligence. I mean, AI has been in traditional finance since the 80s, but I think the decentralized nature of the operations going on as well as the data actually means you have a much more complicated ecosystem in many ways than in traditional finance. So there's much more of a role for AI to play, just in keeping all the moving pieces in mind. So I think even more than for centralized finance, AI is going to be critical for DeFi to realize its ambitions. And that the beauty of DeFi is, with smart contracts, you can script any kind of financial instrument you want, any sort of marketplace that you want, with much more facility than can be done with traditional financial software frameworks. On the other hand, the human mind will boggle at the complex constructions you can come up with, and you really need AI to make sense of all this. And we've confronted this in Singularity DAO, which is our DeFi-based spinoff from Singularity Net, where we're looking at using AI to trade baskets of altcoins, and then looking at futures and options ecosystems defined on top of these AI managed baskets of altcoins, and you do staking and yield farming and such on top of there. And you really need machine learning to keep track of it. And you also need AI going even beyond the AI traditionally used in centralized financial markets, because the sort of non-stationarity, the volatility and the frequency of regime changes in the crypto markets goes beyond what's seen in traditional markets. So yeah, I think DeFi is gonna expand tremendously in coming years and become a huge section of global finance. And I think you're gonna see AI become a dominant factor in DeFi as it grows, just out of necessity. And we're trying to make that happen now. We are making it happen in Singularity DAO, but of course it's not going to just be one project. It's going to be trends in the whole industry.
That's interesting. That's really fascinating, is to see how AI is actually building into the world of both centralized and decentralized finance. So Sudhir, what are your thoughts on DeFi, and how would you define it within basically the area of work that you're doing at Capgemini?
Thank you, Anjali. And look, being part of global consulting system integrator and serving pretty much a large categories of financial services incumbents, I would see DeFi is emerging as more of an opportunity than a threat, and in primarily two angles. One, I think it is it's an avenue to drive down inefficiencies across the board of the traditional finance system, which we all know at every level. And more importantly, I think DeFi will open up newer avenues to engage customers, consumers, and through newer products and services which banks can offer into the broader sort of a value chain. Now, what I mean by that is, across the board, it's not limiting to just one or two use cases, right? So it starts from retail banking to capital markets, trade, all the way up to insurance. I think there is enormous potential for incumbents to open up revenues, and that's where I feel companies like Capgemini has a role to play in bringing the incumbents into the DeFi world, navigating it, and unpacking the potential that it has to offer.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. And Justin, what are your thoughts on it with Ligon and the work you're doing there?
Yeah, hi, thanks for the opportunity. I can give you some time back if you like here. I'll be quite brief. So Ligon is a digital asset marketplace, right? And where we tokenize financial contracts between multiple parties. And in doing so, we're leveraging smart contracts and also off-chain business logic that sets the rules and enables participants to do business with each other. So people get caught up on the definition of DeFi. So if DeFi is defined by presence of digital assets, smart contracts, protocols, as discussed, and dApps, then we are certainly part of that definition. But it shouldn't just be kind of described, for me, it shouldn't just be described as all of cryptocurrency, and there's these kind of like boundaries to that word. It's become amorphous with other understandings of what it means. So you've got to be careful how you position it.
Sure, that's a great point. We have talked about the advantages of the DeFi ecosystem, but I was reading when I was doing some research for the panel, I came across a report by Deloitte, which stated that TradeFi institutions spend about $20 billion in trade processing annually and can actually save up to 80% of post-trade settlement expenses by leveraging the distributed ledger technology. So this is obviously one big advantage. Is there any other advantage that we've not touched on that you guys want to talk about? Sudhir, from your perspective, is there anything else that you can add in terms of advantages?
I would think, just building on Justin's point as well, that efficiency is, of course, it's the biggest driver for incumbents, as you called out in the report, right? Having said that, there's been various experiments being done for last whatever number of years, 6, 7, 8 years, and to realize the full potential of what a distributed ledger technology has to offer, it's not been a great success that way in terms of a scale, right? So it's still been on paper. Now, I think a big potential out there, which is now driving slightly in a different angle, is to bring newer asset classes and thereby create opportunities for more people to participate, right, and create the opportunity for illiquid asset to get into liquidity. So what I see in the market now is at least 8 out of 10 bigger banks, financial institutes are eyeing for that market. Not just banks, even the large insurers. They're looking for their asset base and figuring out how can they introduce or capitalize on either the existing assets or introducing entirely new asset in the value chain. I would think that has a huge potential going forward.
Sure. Yeah. Justin, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I can add to that. I think you can't get away from the benefits of speed. I'm still amazed every time I do a crypto transfer, just how straightforward it is and how quick it is between parties. It's just mind blowing, and that's a transfer of value. Now, what we're in the contract space, so the speed to contract to enable parties to collaborate digitally across the globe very quickly and immutably record what's going on. So it's like a speed to contract, right? And I think that levels a playing field a lot for SMEs and small businesses. They don't have those benefits right now. They have to go and walk to banks, for example, and get hard copies of everything and put them in the post. So just that speed to contract and the immutability of the decisions and influences on the terms within that contract and having the immutability of those signatures that effectively can wipe out fraud. People talking about check fraud, well, talking about checks, but okay, check fraud. We're in the bank guarantee space. That's our first cab off the rank, and fraud is an equivalence of check fraud. And these are big numbers, right? That takes it off the table completely. And let's not forget the digital equivalent, right? So removing 98% of the carbon footprint used in producing paper and moving it around the world. And anybody that's been in the cap markets business, derivatives particularly, has been around ISDA confirmations and ISDA contracts. You just know how weighty those documents are. So, and across all of this, of course, you've got the promotion of choice. Okay,
and those are great points.
You bring choice into it, then that drives better customer experiences because competition gets brought to the table. So.
Yeah, for sure. We're gonna shift gears a little bit and talk about the state of DeFi adoption now. The total value locked in DeFi is about $100 billion, which is 900% up from $10 billion just in the first half of 2020. And this is a Goldman Sachs report, right? Ethereum has settled about $6 trillion worth of transactions in the last 12 months, ending October 2021. So the question to the panel is, will DeFi give TradeFi a run for its money? And what's driving this exponential DeFi growth? And what are your views on the current state of DeFi adoption? Ben, would you like to give us your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, coming back to the theme of speed, I mean, transaction speed and low cost are, of course, important, and minimization of wasteful environmental impact, which will come as DeFi moves off Ethereum onto more modern blockchains. But I think that the speed of innovation is also important, and it's key to remember with smart contracts as a platform and with a decentralized infrastructure that makes it easier for any random parties with a good idea to put new DeFi protocols and systems out there. I mean, I think we're creating a financial network in which new ideas can be conceived, tested and rolled out to real users much more rapidly than was ever the case before. So I think at a certain point, what's going to be ongoingly driving the growth of DeFi is going to be just exciting new mechanisms and financial instruments that are rolling out on on DeFi in a way that just wasn't able to happen in the regular economy, right? And we can't, just as yield farming, people didn't predict, we can't predict exactly what will be the next round of innovations, but we can see there's much less friction in the way of new innovations getting widely deployed. So I think there's a number of stages we have to go through to get to wider adoption of DeFi. I mean, right now, just the mechanics of using decentralized finance is not as simple as we would like it to be, right? So we need improvements in basic user experience, and I think once that's done, we're going to see significant increase in adoption, and then the next big burst in adoption after the first one that comes from improved UX will be from sort of wave after wave of ongoing innovation, which is what happens when you're not stifled by unnecessarily centralized control structures.
Those are really great points. But Sudhir, I'm gonna ask this question to you straightforwardly. Will DeFi really give TradeFi a run for its money? We've talked about the advantages. We've talked about speed, innovation. These things are sort of key to making DeFi what it is today. So is it going to really give TradeFi a run for its money?
I think right now there are a number of areas which DeFi has to address for it to give a run for TradeFi. The reason I'm saying is whilst last 1 year, probably last 1.5 years, there's been acceleration in DeFi, but still, if you look at the complexity of technology, the sheer education of the concepts, as well as, it's today even not really accessible to everybody, right? So it is created by certain community, it is driven by certain community. Yes, it has a potential for sure, and it has a great avenue to innovate, and sky is the limit for innovators. But how will it come to a mass adoption, right? So where everybody in this world, including those who do not necessarily have all the understanding, will know about different concepts, and at the same time there is protection, because at the end of the day we are talking about money here, right? So those type of issues will have to be addressed. So I would think TradeFi, instead of experimenting and being a tourist of DeFi, I would think it's an opportunity for them to create that close net with the DeFi community, and as well maybe actively engage regulators and figure out what type of use cases that can drive mass adoption. So that's what I would think.
Sure. That's right. What we're really talking about here is cooperation between TradeFi and DeFi, right? In a way. My next question is really, how are existing banks, fintechs, and institutions reacting to DeFi, and how are they preparing to adapt to this new reality where decentralized networks are taking over the basic services that were offered by them? Can they play a role in it or benefit from decentralization? And if so, how? Justin, would you like to take that?
Yeah, sure. I think it's not necessarily correct to say that anybody's taking over anything. The banks didn't necessarily own the networks; they were just heavy users of them, and so I don't think it's a threat that the networks get taken over. But the banks do bring certified customers and balance sheets to the equation, and I think it's very important for anybody, any fintech firm out there, to realize that the banks actually are your friends, and they're your channel partners, and you really should kind of work. Just think about that. I mean, you can try and go up against them, but they do have the customer base already, and they actually the banks that I work with, at least, actively embrace technology evolution. And want to do it more, would like to be quicker at it. It's just that the regulations that govern their actions they need them to be enabled, so they can actually get into the DeFi networks and start offering these types of user experiences. Having this big announcement from CBA recently, about adopting Bitcoin into their apps with Gemini, which is great. But that's been a long time coming. So they want to embrace it. They just need help getting there because they're regulated. So I do believe that technologists and fintech firms need to meet them halfway, right? If they really want access to them, huge customer bases, or bring services. I think Alchemy is a good example where they're trying to bridge DeFi to CeFi. We've got to meet them halfway to enable them to bring their businesses into what we do by observing what controls their decision making.
Sure. Sudhir, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would echo that. The most common sort of thread or journey that banks have started to use towards DeFi is by looking at introducing cryptos or currencies, that sort of as a first starting point. And there's so many examples. DBS has been doing it and so on. And normally we see maybe 2-3 different categories in which the banks are approaching. Everybody starts with understanding what is the DeFi taxonomy and what role they have to play. But let's not forget that it is not just one element, right? So banks also are working closely on CBDC, right? So they would like to assess what does that going to offer and what does that mean to their ecosystem. So primarily it starts with crypto, then move into more of the wider market towards wealth management on offering various assets and custody solutions and so on. So that's how banks are trying to explore the areas into DeFi, being as a tourist and then as an experimenter. And however, there are some instances where banks have been a bit more bolder. They have rolled out their own coins, created a more of consortia and a network which can share more broadly commercial bank or interbank transfers and so on. So there are different examples, but I would think from a retail banking perspective, majority of them are looking for what are consumers looking at, and that is wealth creation, and primarily starts with the crypto as a quick win.
That's great. So for banks, obviously the first thing to navigate is regulation, and then the bigger elephant in the room is technology itself, right? So more than 40% of the bank's code is built on COBOL, which is a 60-year-old programming language. How seamless or challenging is it to really integrate blockchain or AI-based DeFi services with traditional banking? Ben, what are your thoughts on that?
I think blockchain and AI, they're very major disruptive forces, and regulations are going to need to adapt to these. After regulations have adapted, the door is open for traditional financial companies to plunge in and adopt smart contracts. Upstart financial firms that were natives to the new technologies. There's no doubt. There's at this point there's incredible opportunity both for existing firms and for new entrants in the market, because we're like 2 or 5% of the way through the DeFi revolution. Like this is really just at the beginning.
Sure. This is a good segue into my next question, which is our last part of this discussion on what are the challenges of mainstream DeFi adoption? Sudhir, would you like to take that?
I think what I have seen so far is, there is absolutely lack of understanding even, what it is and how to start the journey. And I'm wearing the incumbent's lens here. So, so that is one. The second, I would think, the consumer protection area, right? So if I'm a regulated entity, what are the type of risks that this I'm going to introduce? Could be the other one, which is sort of bothers in the journey. So I think there's no easy answer. I would think it's a journey, and maybe you go through technology complexity, learnings that you have to do, use cases that you think that are relevant for you to go through. All these becomes part of hindrance. And just to give one example, we have seen how banks went through the open banking regime a while ago, right? So it has gone through very similar journey. So typically you have traditional banking to digital banking and then to open banking, and the whole journey has taken ages, right? So many years. Just to modernize and adopt and offer. So if I apply that lens, I think we are too far away from incumbents getting into DeFi world that quickly. Just one point to build is we should also be looking at organizations like Coinbase as an example, who are still regulated and offering the services that are on DeFi. And as well the pure hardcore DeFi organization. So there are multiple buckets of companies, and depending on how they're regulated, the adoption will vary.
Great. We have under 2 minutes or 3 minutes left. I'm going to ask this one important question on decentralization and financial inclusion, right? Because that's the whole point of decentralization, with blockchains being permissionless, trustless, and immutable, and they're immutable. How can DeFi enable financial inclusion to bring the 1.7 billion unbanked people to benefit from decentralization? Are there any real-world examples? Justin, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts on that, I can think of one good example, which is it's been around for a while, Hive Online. In Africa, with Sophie Baxted running that, empowering female rural entrepreneurs. People should look that up. It's a great initiative, and it's been a lot of hard work. It's been going on for about 5 years. But if you think about it, it's about giving people an identity first of all and foremost. Then giving them the means to be able to save and transfer value, whether they're trading or not. So I do think using the networks and telco is the natural evolution of the bank branch. And look at it that way, it reaches just about everywhere on the planet. I'm not too sure a sat phone in Antarctica counts, but that's one of the great beauties of what it can do, and the art of the possible about identity as well as financial inclusion.
We'll surely be checking Hive Online after this panel. Sorry, did anyone else want to add examples to there? Ben?
Ben, you go.
I think that there haven't been as many great examples yet as we would like, but we're gonna see a lot during the next few years. I know at SingularityNet, we've been working closely with Cardano blockchain, and we're in the midst of porting our AI platform, SingularityNet, to Cardano. And we've been working closely with the Ethiopian government. Charles Hoskinson, the CEO of IOHK behind Cardano, right now is on a tour of Africa, meeting with multiple African leaders, and we see a lot of interest there in what blockchain and decentralized finance can do, and it's sort of leapfrogging beyond centralized finance, which is in a primitive state in many of these countries. So I think there's a lot of potential there, and governments there are more on board than governments in the developed world. So it'll be quite interesting to see how that unfolds.
Sure, we're almost out of time here, which brings us to the end of the panel. I'd like to thank you all for this wonderful insights, and we'll sure be learning more about the world of DeFi and how it's going to change, the financial services offered to consumers. I'd like to thank you again, and bye-bye for now.
Thanks so much.